For most agents, content feels heavy because it sits outside their normal way of working. And when something lives outside your systems, it always feels harder than it needs to be. I'm Clint, and this is Creativity That Converts, the show where we unpack the art and strategy of using video to grow your business. This is the space to learn what's working, what's changing, and how to create content that really connects. No fluff, no ego, just real talk that gets results. Welcome to Creativity That Converts. In the last episode, we talked about how to audit your existing content and how to step back and look at what you've already created and identify what's missing without throwing everything out and starting again. And for most people, that leads to a very real, very practical question. Okay, but how does this actually fit into my week? Because understanding the strategy is one thing, having the time and headspace to execute it is another. So today I want to slow this right down and talk about something that often gets overlooked in content creation. This works the same way everything else works in your business. Once you have a system, the effort required starts matching the system. Content is no different. So why does content feel hard in the first place? Well, for most agents, content feels heavy because it sits outside their normal way of working. It's treated like an extra task, a creative burden, something that requires motivation and energy. And when something lives outside your systems, it always feels harder than it needs to be. Think about the parts of your business that don't feel heavy anymore. Your listing process, your appraisal flow, your buyer management, your follow-up. They didn't always feel smooth. They only started feeling easier once there was a structure around them. Content hasn't had that same treatment from you yet. Authority content isn't a creative exercise. This is the first big reframe. Authority content isn't about creativity, it's about capture. You already have systems explaining things. How long does a sale usually take? How pricing works? What happens if property doesn't sell? How buyers behave in your market? You explain these things calmly and clearly every day or every week, because that's your job. Authority content is simply taking those explanations and putting them somewhere they can be working without you being present. Once you see it that way, content stops feeling like extra work and it becomes a mirror of work you're already doing. So here's the key idea that I want to land for you today. Content gets easier when it has a system because you stop making decisions every time. Without a system, every piece of content requires deciding what to talk about, how to say it, how long should it be, where should it live. That decision fatigue is what drains people, not the filming, not the creating content. A system removes that. Once you know who the video is for, what question it's answering, and what format you're using, the effort required drops dramatically. Just like every other system in your business. Build the system first, not the output. Most people get this backwards. They try to be consistent before they're clear. They post regularly, but randomly. They film often, but without structure. They hope repetition will create momentum. But consistency without structure just creates noise. Once the system exists, filming becomes predictable, batching becomes possible, content stops feeling emotional. You're no longer asking, what should I film this week? You're asking, which question am I capturing next? That's a completely different mental load. One system, multiple outcomes. This is where time really starts to get saved. When content is systemized, one clear answer can support a long-form YouTube video, multiple short-form social media clips, client education message before meetings, trust building after referrals, and visibility in AI search. But you didn't create 5 pieces of content. You created one system-driven explanation that gets reused. That's leverage. And leverage is how this fits into a busy week. Why short form stops feeling like work. This is also why short form becomes easier after the system exists. Without a system, short form feels like pressure. Be clever, be engaging, be quick. With a system, short form becomes extraction. You're not inventing ideas, you're highlighting moments. A sentence from a pricing explanation, a line from a selling process video, a clarification you've already given 100 times. Short form stops being creation and it becomes amplification. The hidden time benefit that most people miss, though, is something that most agents just don't expect. Authority content doesn't just take less time, it actually gives it back. Because once those explanations exist, client conversations are shorter, meetings are better pre-framed, expectations are clearer, and trust is built earlier. You're no longer starting from zero every time. People arrive informed. That's not just marketing efficiency, that's operational efficiency. So why does this work long term? The benefit of a system is that it compounds. Once your core answers exist, you don't need to redo them every year. You refine them or update them, or add a nuance if you need to. You build around them instead of constantly replacing them. That's why this approach works for people, platforms, and AI systems. Clarity doesn't expire quickly, bringing it back to reality. So if content feels overwhelming right now, this is the grounding thought to come back to. You don't need more time. You don't need more energy. You don't need to become a content creator. You need a system that matches the way you already work. Once that exists, effort naturally drops to meet it, just like everything else in your business. That's it for episode 5. If this idea of systems resonated and you're starting to see that content doesn't have to live outside your week, the next step is simply a conversation. If you want to talk through how remote systems can support your content, from planning to scripting to editing, and how that could fit into the way you already work, feel free to reach out. No pressure, no obligation, just a chance to map what's possible and see if it makes sense. All the details are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week.